Royal Cambodian Air Force, 2024, Aircraft Inventory. Current active, 24 aircraft. Royal Cambodian Air Force. Transport. BN2, 1 units. MA-60, 2 units. Y-12, 1 units. Combat helicopter. AW-109, 1 units. H-125 MAS-350, 1 units. Me-817, 9 units. Z-9, 9 units. Cambodia Air Force History. The Royal Cambodian Air Force was established, with French support, on April 1, 1954, shortly after Kampuchea gained independence on November 9, 1953. Royal Khmer Aviation received aid from various sources and thus its composition was somewhat varied. Prior to the overthrow of Prince Sihanouk in 1970, the Khmer Air Force, KAF, was aptly described as the Phnom Penh Royal Flying Club. It possessed a few MiG fighters and a varied assortment of other aircraft of all types and origins. Maintenance support of this aerial museum was at best haphazard. The mission of the Air Force was primarily the air defense of the country, but it was also responsible for providing air transport and tactical support to the Army. The Air Force also had the additional responsibility of participating in civic action and providing a pool of pilots for civil aviation. The pilots were drawn from the extensive branches of the royal family, the lesser nobility, and the wealthier families. Command of the Air Force was a political plum and was rewarded based upon personal loyalty. Inefficiency was tolerated, both because the Air Force lacked a real mission, and because an efficient Air Force could pose a threat to the palace. In late 1967, the Royal Cambodian Air Force, with around 2,000 men, was one of the smallest in Southeast Asia. It had about 100 aircraft, which included several jet fighters and light bombers. Designed primarily to support the ground forces, it was used mostly to provide aerial resupply, paradrops and the transport of personnel. The operational elements formed a composite squadron, although they were organizationally divided into separate operational and technical groups. Aircraft in operational units in 1967 included MiG-17 jet fighters, A-1 Skyraider light bombers, French, and T-28 Trojan ground attack aircraft. There were also a number of jet trainers, 12 C-47 transports and other miscellaneous transports, including several helicopters. The Air Force had its main storage and issue point at Phnom Penh, which handled virtually all aircraft maintenance and had 4 well-equipped hangars where most of this work could be performed. Most of the maintenance, excluding major overhauls that were performed outside of the country, was supervised by French advisory personnel. In 1970, Lon Nol announced that democracy was no longer appropriate for Cambodia and began shortly after the coup to rule by decree. His brother Lon Non employed assassination, bribery and slander to eliminate almost all capable leaders from the government. Though Lon Nol held elections in 1972, the vote was rigged after a Cambodian Air Force pilot stole a plane and bombed Lon Nol's residence in 1973. Lon Nol responded by suspending civil rights. Following the Lon Nol coup of March 18, 1970, the Khmer Air Force, unlike its sister services, was not called upon to play a decisive role in the unfolding battle for control of Cambodia. Air power, when and where needed, was provided by the U.S. Air Force. The KAF underwent some expansion, particularly in the development of a basic inventory of common-type aircraft. Its overall development as a self-sufficient military organization was not fully addressed. From the U.S. mission viewpoint, time and cost factors were prohibitive. U.S. air power was more than adequate. In addition, the new Khmer government, like the old, viewed air power as a potential direct threat to the head of state and treated any proposed reorganization of KAF and its commandant structure accordingly. KAF, to a greater degree than either of her sister services, thus consistently suffered from inept leadership.